I went home and started deciding what I'd take with me if I decided to go and what I'd leave behind. If I was just going for 3 to 6 months, which is all I could legally do, I could come back for some things, and if I stayed forever, I could part with lots of it. My collection of first editions were a hard decision to make. When I finally decided to leave them, I took out some of the bookshelf and opened them to random time-yellowed pages, lifted them to my nose, and smelled that delightful fragrance of literature that I knew I'd miss. I went through all of my drawers and regarded various things I found there. My old name tag from when I worked at E.R. Bradley's saloon. There'd been the legit one that just said Johnny, and then this one, the one I'd swapped the real one for at 10 o'clock when my boss left and I was in charge. It said El Canto, and you wouldn't believe the hit it was with customers. They'd laugh, and I invariably kissed at least some of the cuter ones when the restaurant became a club at 10:30. People are funny like that. I stared at it for a while, grinning, and then put it back. Eventually, I found the book. Another friend of my mom had spotted the budding little Casanova in me when I hit 17, and had given me one of those little black leather books that said blondes, brunettes, and redheads in gold letters. I chuckled and opened it, looking at all the names and numbers and brief notes I'd scribbled to remind me who was who, like rides horses or plays violin. I sat down on the edge of my bed and remembered each one of them with all the love I'd felt for them at the time. I flashed on the moments we'd spent together and wondered why we'd broken up and where they were now, until I got up and went to the desktop. I got into MySpace and the new one, Facebook, to look them up. Katie wasn't on either of them, which was a bummer. I haven't told you anything about Katie, and I'm going to keep it that way. She was special, and I'd been a real jerk. I went through the book and found most of them, and I sent them all friend requests until I got to Tamara, and paused. Was that a sleeping dog I really should wake? How many times had I broken her heart and put it back together only to break it again? Every time I did it, I felt so bad afterwards I couldn't face her, and when bipolar Johnny was gone and I ran into her again somewhere, I'd apologize profusely, saying she didn't deserve the things I'd said, and that then she'd take me back and the cycle'd begin anew. She was just so innocent, so sweet, that even though she was a little bit older than me, I always felt guilty, like I was taking advantage of a child. And that became self-loathing that would tick-tock down to the explosion. Really, I felt like a pedophile when I'd make love to her, and nothing could erase that horrible feeling. I'd burn with the sin of sullying her until it was too much to bear, and then I'd break her heart. 2 days later, I'd wonder what the hell I'd been thinking to just throw away a prize like that. Why couldn't I just keep my stupid mouth shut and get over whatever it was, and then I'd start pining for her? Should I call, at least just to say I was sorry? She was probably married by now and safe from my evil clutches, as well she should, because she was a hell of a catch. She probably had kids, maybe a little girl with the same wavy Sicilian hair, or a boy with the same disarming smile. I should at least see. I should at least call her up and say hi. I dialed her number and I waited, listening to the ring with my heart in my mouth until the voice of an older woman answered. It was startling to hear such a mature voice, and I was not sure it was her. I began to stammer and cough, and she asked patiently what she could do for me. I paused. Here was the Rubicon. I could hang up now or speak out. I could back up into safety or dive off the cliff. Tamara? Something changed in the silence on the phone. Her silence went from quizzical to hostile, as if I heard her eyebrows dropping from their arch across her forehead to knot together over hardening eyes. Who is this? She asked. I swallowed hard. I deserved this. I knew it. I could still hang up, though. But then I wouldn't be much of a man, would I? It's Johnny. Johnny Yen. If you've ever felt like Wile E. Coyote when he realizes the ground isn't beneath him anymore, you'll know what I felt like then. Right when his ears droop and his neck stretches long and thin because his body's plummeting to the ground 1,000 miles beneath him, right before his head snaps elastically out of the frame to catch up with it, that moment of, oh shit. What the hell are you calling for, you son of a bitch? Tamara? Tammy was my daughter. Well, is she... And then I realized, a second too late, that she had said, was. No, you little shit, she isn't here. She hasn't been here for a very long time. You took my little girl away from us. I hung up the phone, shaking like a leaf. I couldn't breathe. My heart was beating so hard that my vision was crimping at the edges, and I jumped half out of my own skin when the phone rang again. The same old ring I'd heard 1,000 times before became somehow as harsh and accusing as the voice I knew I'd hear if I dared to answer. Damn you, Star 69. I could never answer this phone again. I stared in horror at it, unable to move. You gonna answer that? My mom called. Tear the phone cord out of the wall, I thought. Whatever you do, don't answer, I thought as I lifted the suddenly heavy phone to my ear, pressing the glowing green button. I couldn't speak. My mouth was so dry I could only croak. Oh my God, Tammy was dead and it was my fault. Johnny! Josh shouted. I could hear a loud rushing of wind as if he were calling from the bed of a speeding pickup truck or an airboat screaming across the Everglades. I gasped and sagged against the wall. Listen, John said, we're throwing a bon voyage party for you at Respects tomorrow night, so you better be all spiffy for you in your Sunday best. I couldn't believe my ears. One, a party for me would have been a pleasant surprise on any day, because I'd never think I deserved it, and two, I damn sure knew I didn't deserve one now. I tried to reel myself in. Excuse me. I tried to reel myself in, pretending that the other phone call that just happened hadn't happened, and I was still in this happy world where I didn't know I'd pushed that poor girl too far one night. This other life I'd had up until 2 minutes ago when I found out there were consequences to the stupid shit I did. Tammy was dead. Tamara Musso killed herself because I broke her heart. I shut my eyes and saw her face, smiling sweetly at me as she gazed lovingly up, and I saw the way she lit up whenever I'd tell her I was sorry and that I loved her. Saw her notice me in a crowded room when I walked in, and the way she'd wink at me while talking to her friends. She was the most beautiful girl in the world, and I deserved to be dead instead of her. Awesome, I said weakly. Thanks, bro. You bet. Catch you later. I nodded as if he could hear it, and hung up. The phone rang again, and my heart turned to stone. I squeezed my eyes shut tight, lifted the phone once more to my ear, and accepted the call. Silence. I waited, my breath held, and the silence was worse than what I was expecting, until I heard a very nervous voice asking, Johnny? I couldn't believe it. Of all the things that could have happened, of all the people that could have called me up out of the blue, especially in that dark moment, Katie was the last one I'd expect. Katie? I gasped. Hi. We talked for hours. She had called me from Connecticut, having just broken up with her asshole boyfriend, whom she confronted with his other girlfriend and kicked him in the nuts, then came back to her place shaking with rage, looking for someone to talk to. For some reason, she looked me up on MySpace after all these years, saw that I was having a goodbye party, and 411'd my number. Now she was throwing caution to the wind, saying, wherever you're going, don't go. Come to see me instead. We'll go to Vermont where my family has a Swiss chalet and you get the picture. And I wanted to. With all my heart, I wanted to. I would have left all this mess behind me and gone off to be with the one I really wanted all along, but seeing myself as the person I was only a moment before, I refused to put her in that position. Suddenly knowing what kind of a monster I was, I couldn't do it to her. It was a hard choice, and it was hard to tell her no, but that was the best thing for her. Next night, I went to my bon voyage party, really rather chuffed that one had been thrown for me, and wondering if it would be a big turnout. I was still on the fence about whether I should go to Guatemala or stay here and be a man with Jen, and I figured I'd confess everything to Josh and ask him what he thought. When Respectables came into view, I squinted at someone in a Joker t-shirt with a 2-foot-tall mohawk, wondering who it was. I mean, it kind of looked like Josh, but... And then I felt like an idiot. It was Josh. I'd just never seen him without his baseball cap and with his hair gelled up. Wow, I thought. How little I pay attention to my friend. I got to the door, where Josh was leaning against a palm tree with the tall, fat website designer in a Decepticons t-shirt and a few other people I didn't recognize. Josh smiled evilly at me, and looking back on it, I totally misread its meaning. The man of honor, he called, and the others looked at me, all of them affecting disinterest. It made my small hairs all stand on end, as if warning me of danger. I slowed my stride a little, uncertain, but the look on Josh's face vanished, replaced by an overly friendly smile that made me even more wary. There was an awkward moment when I arrived, the guy in the Decepticons t-shirt looking like he was trying not to say something. His shoulders were up, and he kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Josh, too, was tense, and it made his plastic smile so obviously false. Excuse me. "Ready?" he asked. I frowned, looked from one of them to the other and back again, and nodded. Josh set his jaw and reached to open the door for me. Music and light tumbled out, and I went into Respectables for the last time. The place was packed. That was the first thing I saw, and it made me feel great. All of the people gathered underneath a banner that read, "Bon Voyage, Johnny!" All of them were talking amongst themselves until they noticed me, and instead of shouting something in unison and throwing confetti, they just went silent. There was a tense moment of confusion until I realized they were all women, and every last one of them I'd slept with. A spotlight came on over me, bathing me in white light and exposing me in front of God and everybody. I looked at Josh, who grinned bitterly at me and slapped me hard on the back. "Here's some of the people you forgot to say goodbye to," he said. "So now's your chance." I stared at him in shock. My friend, who would do this to me, and then I read it in his eyes. All the times he'd been my alibi and my wingman, and I just told him I was leaving in passing, as if he didn't matter. I completely forgot to talk to him about it, to ask his opinion, to even bring it up, and I guess that must have hurt more to him than anything. Jesus, what a selfish asshole I can be. I swallowed hard and looked at all the women looking at me. On cue, the DJ lowered the music, and one of the girls came forward with a microphone in her hand. I couldn't even remember her name. She was one of those goth chicks, albeit a pretty one. She smiled wickedly at me with her purple lipstick that made her look like a drowning victim. "Well, well, well," she said. "Looky what the cat dragged in, the man of honor, Johnny Yen himself." No applause, not like I expected any. "Johnny, you've been a naughty boy." I both saw and felt a dancing glitter, just like whenever my dad was screaming at me when I was a kid and the floor wavered sickeningly beneath my feet. She put on a face of mock concern. "Is your phone broken or something, Johnny? Did you lose all of our numbers? How could that be if we're immortal? Isn't that what you said? We're your immortal beloved, and that since we never fought, we'd all be frozen in your mind as the perfect woman. You painted all of us, didn't you, in the same pose? Did you think we wouldn't ever find out? Did you think we were all that dumb? I guess you did. Well, we are so happy to hear that you're leaving, Johnny. We're so happy that you're going far, far away to never be seen or heard from again." I scanned the faces in the crowd and my heart sank. Every last one of them was looking at me with such hate, and I wanted to die right then and there when my eyes settled on Jen. Poor, heartbroken Jen. What the hell was she doing here? And then I remembered. Josh's sister's party. I bet she was the first one he called. "But before you go, we want to give you a parting gift." Shit. The DJ put on some ominous music that made the girls laugh, and the fog machines billowed out smoke. "We know you believe in magic, Johnny. You sure told us that, making us all feel special for one hot minute. Well, I believe in black magic." The lights made the smoke turn green, and the ominous music got scarier. The girls were giggling. "Some of us have been casting spells since we were little, and so we have plenty of practice," she went on. "So, Johnny, we curse you. We curse you by the power of 3 times 3 to never find love ever anywhere you look. We curse you to a life of sadness and loneliness and misery. And worse, we curse you to think that you've found love with every woman who'll break your heart. Every tramp that'll suck you dry, you'll love her more than life until she can stab you in the heart and you'll still try to kiss her with your dying breath. And worse, we curse you to find the perfect woman, one who'll love and honor you, and we curse you to not love her back." I couldn't breathe. Standing there in all that white light, all those eyes burning into me, and I couldn't breathe at all. "We curse you to suffer, as we've suffered, the shame and rejection of being used up and thrown away, of being made to believe in ourselves and then forgotten. And you will suffer for each one of us. You will never be happy, Johnny." And somehow, I knew that it was true. The girl, whose name I didn't remember, handed the mic to someone and crossed the dance floor toward me, her go-go boots clomping heavily. I shuddered with every step she took until she was right in front of me, eyes cold with contempt. I saw it coming, but made no move to stop it. Her hand wound back and I braced myself. Her drowning victim lips tightened. The slap resounded, and it stung almost as badly as the thunderous applause from all the girls in the club. She turned her back on me and walked away. Another girl came. I could have turned and walked out the door. I could have raised my hand to stop her. I could have done anything at all, but I didn't. She slapped me hard, and I felt my cheek flame red. One by one they came, each of them glaring deep into my eyes for a moment so that I would recognize them before they wound back and struck me. It was almost like an Irish wedding when the poor bride has to stand in front of everyone and be kissed on the cheek by every guest, even the ones she doesn't know, the party crashers. It was funny that that's what I thought of. Then one of them startled me as she approached, when I could make her face out in the dim light. It was my artist friend, the one who'd lent me her matboard cutter. I must have looked at her like, "Et tu, Brute?" because she smiled. There was warmth and pity in her gentle eyes, and when she got to me and reached out and slipped a small folded note into my hand and leaned in to kiss me on the burning cheek. An awful hiss of anger rose from the crowd, and she had to walk past me right out the door and never come here again, or be beaten to a bloody pulp by all of them for being a traitor. Her kiss hurt my skin, but it meant the world to me. When she was gone, I opened the note and read, "I always knew you were no angel. Bye, sweetie. Frog bells." I frowned, wondering where I'd read that nickname before, and looked up at the next girl coming, and my heart stopped. It was Jen. This is where, in the movies, the guy says, "I can explain," but he never does. He just stands there lamely and watches as she calls him every name in the book and storms away. This is where, in somebody else's story, he tries to tell her that he had changed his mind and decided he wasn't going anywhere. But she wasn't going to believe a word I said. Her eyes were white-hot slits of rage and betrayal. Her perfect lips writhed back in a snarl that tried to hold the tears back and did not succeed. Her voice cracked. "When were you going to tell me?" I closed my eyes, trying to teleport myself to Timbuktu or turn invisible and slip away quietly. I wished for lightning to strike me dead. I wished to be anywhere except in front of her. But with my eyes closed, I saw Tamara smiling at me, her adoring eyes so close that I could see myself in them. So I opened them, and Jen's face split into sobs so hard her shoulders heaved and her knees buckled, and I moved to catch her but stopped myself. I stopped and stood as straight as I could. I don't know why, but I knew I shouldn't hold her in front of all the rest of them. Her pain was so loud that it shook the fight out of everyone else, and they stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do, not wanting to see someone hurt like that on display. The DJ must have had an ounce of decency, because all of a sudden the spotlight went out and all the smoke machines blew a roiling gust of fog out onto the floor to hide us. I took my cue and headed for the door. There was nothing I could do to make it better, and the girls would no doubt be coming to put their arms around her, the one whose love hadn't yet turned to hate. I pushed past Josh to get to the door, kicked it open, and stopped. There was a crowd out there on the sidewalk, and every last one of them turned to look at me. All of them men. And I knew. They were the husbands, the boyfriends, the brothers. I saw in their eyes that they'd been waiting for me, and I knew they'd been out there talking about what they were all looking forward to, and now that the moment had arrived, it caught them off guard. It was like the start of a lynching, when every man knows what he's there to do, and he's waiting for someone else to make the first move. I don't know why I didn't feel afraid. To this day, I don't know. There was only one way for me to go, and it wasn't back through that door, and I damn sure wasn't going to let a man touch me, no matter who he was. And I knew that if they had their chance, they'd destroy my face. They wouldn't be satisfied just kicking the shit out of me. They were going to make sure I never got kissed again. And remember what I said about foreshadowing? I pulled the baton out of my pocket, whipped it open into 3 feet of steel with a hard snick, and leaped at the closest one. I hit him hard across the side of his head in a downward stroke, seeing a dark line fill with blood, and struck another one in the teeth with a backhand. Pivoting on my heel and ducking a beer bottle, I punched someone else in the gut, rose and bashed his nose to a bloody pulp with my forehead. Someone grabbed the baton, and I knew I couldn't waste time struggling to get it loose, so I jumping snap kicked some blonde guy in the face, turned, and drove my heel into the side of someone else's knee, hearing a snap. With a desperate snarl, I managed to wrench my baton out of whoever's hand and lunged to jab him in the eye with the knob on the end of it. Reaching out blindly to grab someone else by the hair, I swung with all my might and stove in at least one rib, then cast him aside like a rag doll. I was drunk with bloodlust. I'd never felt anything like it before. I knew I was going to die that night, and I was determined to take as many with me as I could. I sold my life as high as I might. I laid into them blindly and cracked bones with every strike. At some point, I slipped on spilt booze and blood on the sidewalk, and I lost my balance. Thinking I'd gone and done it now, I fought to keep upright, doing a dance that made all of my killers suddenly bold. And that is when the first one crashed into me. I guess the first sign of me losing gave the others a sudden courage, and those that had been holding back until now came on in a rush. They hurled themselves at me, bearing me backwards to the side of the building and dragging me down onto the sidewalk. More dog piled onto me, just leaping and belly flopping on top to crush us. But I managed to land on my side and keep a little breathing space. I snaked my hand into my other pocket and dragged out the bear spray. Fumbling with the safety, I pointed it as away from myself as I could in that tiny space, scrunched my eyes shut and held my breath, and squeezed the button. I felt it hiss all over my hand, felt it burn like my cheek was burning, and heard someone gasp. "Oh my God, get off me, get off me, get off me," he cried. But more people were dogpiling on top of us, the ones from the back of the crowd who wanted to be included before the fun was over. I needed air, but didn't dare take a breath. If I'd known, I don't know if I'd sprayed underneath all those people, because holding your breath when you're proving how cool you are as a kid is a lot different than when you're panting from fighting 20 guys. There's no zen-like tranquility of, I can do this. There's only, oh shit, I'm gonna die. My lungs were screaming for air, and I dimly felt what sounded like Josh shouting from across vast gulfs of space. I felt the crushing weight lighten a little, bit by bit, and I found out later that Josh had come outside and saved me. This part of it apparently had not been his idea, and was something that happened on MySpace while all the girls were planning the party. One had mentioned something to her boyfriend, and he took the initiative of contacting every other guy until they had a lynch mob. And Josh had walked outside to gloat or whatever just in time. I suppose I should be grateful to him to not have hated me so much. For him and the manager to have beaten up all the guys until they were off me and running across the street to O'Shea's. But I'm not. I remember getting up with a long, slow groan and dusting myself off, ignoring the hand someone had offered to help me up, and I staggered off to my car.